In the cold blackness between stars, the vault opened. A hiss of pressurized air, a tremor in steel, the long scream of ancient machinery wrenching itself back to life. Rows of cryo chambers glowed in spectral blue. One by one, 1,000 human eyes flickered awake after nearly 1,000,000 years of dreamless sleep. For an instant, there was nothing, only silence, the frail gasp of lungs relearning breath. And then, across the void, alarms began to scream. They were not alone. 1,000 light-years away, the Supreme Council of the Galactic Federation watched the sensor feeds in disbelief. The lead screen showed the massive silhouette of the Terran Ark ship drifting in orbit of a decaying red dwarf. Its hull was scarred by eons of meteoroid impacts, its radiation shielding half dissolved. Yet somehow, impossibly, it had endured. Its life support had not failed. Its passengers had not died out. It was a relic older than any Federation civilization, older than the Federation itself, older, perhaps, than all their empires combined. To most species, humanity was a rumor, a cautionary tale. In the archives, they were called the first adversary, an unpredictable race that had spread to every corner of the galaxy in a frenzy of expansion and war. It was said they burned bright and fast, rising to heights of technology never seen before, and then extinguishing themselves in a final conflict. The Federation had always believed the last Terran vaults had perished in the darkness that followed. But now, the long-lost Ark had awakened. And so had the sleepers within. Grand Strategos Verada of the Cathari Confederation steepled her claws, her voice low as she addressed the council. We cannot allow them to re-establish a foothold. Their legends say they conquered entire sectors in a single generation. If they regain their strength, they will destabilize every alliance. A chorus of agreement rose among the delegates. Some spoke of preemptive sterilization, of striking before the humans could rebuild. Others counseled caution. Perhaps they were few in number, their technology degraded, their minds eroded by time. What could a handful of primitives do against the unified might of the Federation? In the end, consensus came swiftly. The Federation would dispatch an expeditionary fleet, an overwhelming show of force to seize or destroy the Ark before its inhabitants could pose a threat. 17 dreadnoughts and 100 support craft left their shipyards within the hour, accelerating on fusion plumes bright enough to outshine the nearby suns. The Council congratulated themselves on their prudence. This, they thought, would be a simple operation, an archaeological footnote, a demonstration of the Federation's enduring supremacy. Inside the Ark, the first humans staggered from their pods. They were tall, gaunt figures wrapped in the ceremonial robes of the Exodus epic. Their eyes were haunted by the echo of centuries, and their limbs trembled as they learned gravity anew. Medical drones swarmed around them, administering stabilizers and nutrient infusions. Each name, each record, reappeared in the ship's registry. Generals, scientists, strategists selected not by accident, but by design. The Ark had not preserved the weak. It had preserved the architects of Empire. In a dim command gallery, the woman called Commander Roswin drew her first full breath in 870,000 years. Her hair hung in silvery tangles across her shoulders as she braced herself on the central console. The chamber lights rose in a slow crescendo, illuminating ranks of holoscreens, maps of ancient territories, archives of enemy cultures, schematics of war machines long thought mythical. She touched the activation glyph. The systems murmured to life. Somewhere in the Ark's core, fusion reactors began to spin up, restoring energy to the ship's dormant wings. For the first time in an age, the flagship of the Terran Dominion stood ready. The Federation fleet dropped into orbit 6 days later. Their ships gleamed with the arrogance of new empires' polished hulls, banners of 1,000 worlds fluttering on their signal masts. They broadcast a single transmission in all languages, their voices echoing through every deck of the Ark. Attention, unidentified vessel. You are in violation of Galactic Preservation Statute 3. You are to power down all systems and prepare. For boarding, resistance will be met with total force. Inside the command gallery, Roswin listened. She did not reply. She simply watched the fleet's formations on her display, noting the gaps between escorts, the vulnerabilities in the dreadnought screens. Her people were still waking. Their weapons were still cold. And yet she felt no fear. Outside, the Federation. Ships spread into an attack sphere, confident that their presence alone would compel surrender. After all, the humans had been forgotten for nearly 1,000,000 years. Their legends were just that, stories to frighten children. What could they do, these resurrected relics, against a civilization that had ruled the stars unchallenged? Deep in the Ark's data cores, ancient algorithms stirred fragments of an intelligence so old that even Roswin did not know its true name. The ship's sensors turned outward, studying the encroaching fleet with a gaze colder than the void. And as the Federation prepared to broadcast a final ultimatum, a voice crackled across the comm channels. It was a human voice, worn with age but unbroken by time. "We have returned," it said, clear and steady. "And we remember." Somewhere on the Federation flagship, an ensign shivered. For an instant, just an instant, he wondered if all the stories were true. The Federation Armada advanced with the confidence of a civilization unchallenged for 300 millennia. On every bridge, officers observed the drifting Ark through shimmering tactical overlays, reading its decayed hull and weakened gravity fields as signs of primitive obsolescence. Probes darted from the dreadnoughts like metal insects, their sensor arrays probing every fracture and seam. Inside the Ark, the humans moved in silence. Their steps were slow, but purposeful, as though each awakening cell carried the memory of something colossal. Commander Roswin conferred with her adjutants while ancient servitors extended skeletal arms to assist the newly revived. Medical. Drones administered stabilizers and recited health data in soft, synthetic voices. To the Federation's tactical AI, these activities looked innocuous, a disorganized resuscitation of a species that should have stayed extinct. Even when the Ark's power signature began to climb, first a trickle, then a steady surge, the Federation interpreted it as a last desperate attempt to appear formidable. On the flagship Radiant Ascendancy, Strategos Verana leaned over her comm officer's shoulder. The human's voice still echoed in the memory buffers. "We have returned. And we remember. Scan their transmission systems again," she ordered. "They must be broadcasting from a salvageable relay. I want that frequency traced and neutralized." "Strategos," the comm officer began, "there's something unusual. The signal didn't originate from any known comm relay. In fact, it appears to have come from every part of their hull simultaneously." Verana's pupils constricted. "Explain." "It's as if their entire ship spoke the message. Impossible. Confirm the data." While technicians argued over the analysis, the second wave of boarding parties deployed. Dropships in tight formation glided through the thin atmosphere enveloping the Ark, their hulls gleaming against the backdrop of the dying star. Inside, armored soldiers adjusted grav stabilizers and charged stun weapons. They rehearsed containment protocols and reviewed dossiers on human physiology, citing weaknesses, expected psychological fragility, recommended intimidation tactics. A young boarding captain, a praetor named Astellan, glanced at the briefing slate in his gauntlet hand. He had studied countless extinct cultures in the Federation's military academies. None had ever resisted a boarding operation of this scale. And yet, watching the dark silhouette of the Ark grow in his viewport, he felt something he couldn't name. "Approaching insertion coordinates," the dropship pilot announced. Astellan took a steadying breath. "On my mark, initiate docking clamps. Prepare to breach." They touched down with the finality of a sentence passed. Inside the Ark, Roswin felt the tremor as the clamps bit into the hull. She did not flinch. She studied the long banks of holoscreens depicting the Federation's formations and the boarding. Party vectors. Each incursion corridor glowed bright red. She touched her wrist console, calling up ancient files. Schematics older than any living empire. Her adjutant, a pale man named Leon, swallowed. "They're making final approach, Commander. Orders?" "Let them come," Rose One murmured from her vantage. The Federation soldiers looked like children, marching into the ruins of a temple whose gods they no longer believed in. The boarding teams split into strike elements, each advancing through long shadowed corridors. Their helmet lamps caught glints of frost and flakes of metal drifting in. The stale air. Here and there, murals emerged in their beams bas-reliefs of armored figures wielding weapons the Federation's historians had dismissed as myth. "Environmental controls are negligible," Estellan reported to the flagship. "We detect minimal power in life support systems beyond the central galleries." "Copy," Verana replied. "Continue to Command Core. Secure data archives." The soldiers pressed deeper, passing chambers where the air was so cold their armor's servos groaned with contraction. A few recorded the murals for later study, curious about the crude iconography. They had been trained to expect disarray. Crumbling infrastructure, panicked humans, at most a token attempt at defense. Instead, they found everything intact. Impossibly intact. When they reached the central spine of the ship, they encountered the first anomaly. A colossal chamber stretched before them, filled with machines they could not categorize. Tall pillars etched with scrolling text pulsed with a rhythm that no scanning array could decipher. Estellan moved closer to one pillar, waving his sensor wand over the symbols. As he did, the text shifted and flowed like liquid metal, rearranging itself into Federation standard. He stepped back, heart hammering in his throat. "Strategos," he called over the com. I think the systems just recognized us. Explain." "These inscriptions, they're responding to our presence." Static crackled over the line. In the flagship's command deck, Verana stared at the new data streaming in. She tapped her claws against the armrest, irritation fighting with unease. "What do they say?" Estellan swallowed, his visor reflecting the words. "This is not your sanctuary." Behind him, the other soldiers shifted nervously. The air felt thicker, as if the Ark itself was watching. "Continue," Verana ordered. "Secure the chamber. These are artifacts. Nothing more." But even as she spoke, something flickered across the sensors of every Federation dreadnought, a ripple of energy traveling through the Ark's hull. Subspace readings twisted and spiked. The technicians on the flagship scrambled over their consoles. Voices rising. "Strategos, we are detecting a quantum resonance." "Define it." "It's not a weapon signature. It's a wake-up signal." The com channels filled with a low, resonant tone that made every translation matrix stall. For an instant, every console across the Federation fleet went black. Then, in perfect synchrony, all the Ark's running lights ignited like eyes opening in the dark. Estellan turned to his team. All of them were frozen, their armor HUDs displaying the same line. "We remember," outside. The Federation dreadnoughts adjusted their targeting solutions. The movement almost reflexive like predators scenting danger. They could not name. No one spoke the thought aloud, but it hung between them like a funeral shroud. Something here was waiting for them. And it had never been afraid. The central chamber pulsed with a steady, inexorable rhythm. A deep resonance shook the armored boots of the Federation soldiers, as if the Ark's ancient heart had restarted after eons. In the shadows between towering pillars, consoles lit in sequence, bathing the murals in a cold blue glow. Estellan forced himself to raise his weapon, though every instinct screamed that this was no place for guns. "Command, this is Strike Team Alpha," he said, voice raw. "The ship's systems are fully active. We are standing in some kind of command sanctuary. Requesting immediate guidance." On the flagship Radiant Ascendancy, Strategos Varana's pupils narrowed to slits. Maintain position. Do not damage anything. Reinforcements inbound. Her voice remained steady, but the bridge officers around her were visibly unsettled. The sensor feeds showed the Ark's hull plates sliding apart and realigning, revealing hidden ports, dish arrays, and something that looked disturbingly like weapons hardpoints. Strategos, the chief sensor analyst, whispered, "The hull architecture is shifting in real time. It's rewriting itself. Impossible. They don't have the technology." "Perhaps they did," the analyst said hoarsely, "and we just forgot." Inside the Ark, Commander Roswin watched from her gallery as Federation boarding parties fanned out across her decks. Each soldier was a flickering red icon, every squad a new tendril of incursion. But it was their ignorance that drew the faintest curl of a smile to her lips. In their arrogance, the aliens had assumed the Ark was only a ship. They didn't realize it was also a mind. She raised her wrist console. A holographic prompt waited, an ancient seal of command no living Federation citizen had ever seen. Her thumb pressed down. A silent signal pulsed through the ship's neurometal core, older than the Federation itself. For an instant, the boarding parties heard nothing but their own breathing. Then, all at once, the chamber's pillars emitted a piercing harmonic tone. A Stellan fell to one knee, clutching his helmet as symbols cascaded across his visor. Warnings, override attempts, critical system faults, command. He gasped. "We're under." His HUD flickered. "Hello, stranger," the words read. "Do you wish to learn?" The question repeated in every language the Federation had ever cataloged. On the flagship, Varana watched in disbelief as her soldiers' life signs spiked. "Pull them out," she snapped. "Emergency teleport if you must. It's not working," the teleport operator choked. "The Ark is jamming our lock." All over the Federation formation, dreadnoughts scrambled to reposition. Tactical overlays flooded with red as the Ark systems began broadcasting a labyrinth of false sensor echoes. One by one, the ship's targeting solutions vanished under the deluge. RHOS when watched it all unfold. She felt no triumph, only the cold inevitability of a lesson too long delayed. On the boarding channels, a Stellan's voice crackled. We can't see anything. Our feeds are hijacked. Please stand by." The ship's voice intoned in perfect Federation standard. Historical context will be provided. One by one, the pillars projected images into the chamber, vast holograms of human fleets eclipsing stars, of entire worlds bending under the Terran Dominion's will. Hundreds of Federation soldiers watched in stunned silence as history poured into them like molten steel. They saw the Dominion's first expansion beyond the Orion Spur, the forging of the Cryo Arcs, the final consolidation war, the last time humanity had stood at the galaxy's apex. A Stellan's visor displayed a final fragment, an ancient broadcast. "To those who find this Ark," a woman's voice said, rich and steady, "know that we did not vanish. We prepared. Should you awaken us, understand you stand not over the graves of the defeated, but at the threshold of their return." The hologram faded. The pillars fell silent. In the stunned quiet, a Stellan and his soldiers realized their mistake. They had believed the myths were exaggerations, legends spun to justify cautionary laws. But the humans had not been a passing terror. They had been the crucible in which the galaxy had learned fear. "Strategos," Varana's voice burst across every comm channel. "Withdraw! All teams withdraw immediately." The boarding parties scrambled for the exits, but the corridors had changed. Walls shifted, doorways sealed. The Ark was no mere vessel, it was a fortress that refused to be violated. A Stellan squad found themselves trapped in a narrowing passage. Bulkheads fused shut, slicing off retreat. Their sensors whited out. The flagship, the comm feeds degenerated into panicked shouts. Varana clutched her console, fighting to maintain order, reacquire teleport locks. We can't, our targeting grids are blind. On the Ark's bridge, Roswin finally spoke into the com, her voice calm as a tolling bell. Federation. Forces, you have entered sovereign Terran space. You will depart immediately. If you remain, you will be treated as an invading army. No threats. No boasts. Only the certainty of an ultimatum. Veyra knew she could not comply without ceding the field and admitting to the council that they had underestimated the very race they'd sworn could never rise again. Yet as her ship's sensors continued to scramble and her soldiers screamed in confusion and fear, she understood something with chilling clarity. The humans had never forgotten how to make war, and the Federation had just reminded them why. All across the Federation fleet, a single terrible realization spread like frost through glass. This was no archaeological curiosity, no forgotten derelict awaiting salvage. This was a sleeping empire, and it had just decided to stand. Strategos Varana's orders rang out in desperate succession. Override jamming, re-establish telemetry. Any ship with partial lock on our troops, initiate emergency retrieval. But the tactical channels were a haze of garbled signals. No matter how many fallback protocols her technicians activated, the same error pulsed back across every relay. Ark Sovereign Command active priority. Override granted. The humans had seized control of their entire sensor grid in less than 6 minutes. In the central passage, a Stellan squad huddled behind a collapsed column, their visors cycling through blinding static. Through the shimmering interference, the murals continued their silent judgment. "This can't be real," one soldier whispered. "They're extinct. They can't—" "Shut up," a Stellan rasped. "Weapons up. Follow the wall. We're getting out of here." But with every step, the corridors rearranged themselves. It was as if the ship were a living labyrinth, reshaping to contain them. The cold voice of the Ark echoed again, speaking directly into their helmets. "Observe and remember." Without warning, their suit cameras activated, forced to record the images unfolding in every chamber. In one, an armored figure, some ancient human warlord, stood on a dais, addressing a crowd of thousands. Another showed immense starships eclipsing entire planetary rings as they deployed columns of infantry. Every image was an accusation. "You forgot us. You thought we were gone." Outside, the Federation dreadnoughts finally completed a tactical rotation to encircle the Ark. As if to reassert dominance, they powered their main batteries, luminous energy coiling along their segmented barrels. Varana's voice carried over the fleet-wide channel. "All vessels, prepare to fire on my command." "Strategos, our troops are still aboard," one captain protested. "Better they die than the humans regain this ship." A ripple of shock passed across the command decks, but the orders held. Inside the Ark's command gallery, Roswin watched their ships align. Her adjutant, Elian, studied the targeting arrays with dispassionate interest. "They believe they can break the hull with concentrated fire," he said. "They can't." "No," she agreed softly, "but they must try. It is the only thing left to them." She raised her wrist console and keyed a sequence no living hand had touched since the Ark Initiative's final days. Far below, the neurometal core shifted again, awakening deeper systems. Her ancestors had built the Ark not merely to preserve life, but to defend it. For the first time in 870,000 years, the Ark Sovereign's true weapons came online. Varana's dreadnoughts detected the change instantly. Power readings spiked so far past any known Federation threshold that their instruments registered them as errors. Strategos knew energy signatures across the Ark's dorsal spines. "What are they?" "I don't know," the sensor chief whispered. "Nothing in the database matches." From the Ark's hull, long prismatic veins unfolded. They looked almost delicate, like wings catching starlight. Along their edges, crystalline nodules ignited, each one a singularity coil designed to vent and shape gravitational energy. Varana's breath caught. "Target those arrays." Fire before she never finished the order, the Ark released. A single measured pulse, so brief, it didn't register as a beam weapon at all. But every Federation ship struck by that pulse felt the same catastrophic effect. Artificial gravity reversed. Dreadnoughts spun like dead leaves in a hurricane, their hulls shrieking under torsion. Smaller frigates cracked apart instantly, their atomized remains drawn into the Ark's shields. Inside the command gallery, Alian exhaled slowly. One discharge, minimal yield. They won't understand that, Rosewan murmured on the flagship. Verana clutched the railing as the ship's inertial dampeners overloaded. Crew were flung screaming across the bridge. Screens exploded in showers of static. When the main display returned, it showed a tableau of horror, half the fleet drifting crippled, the rest trying to reverse course. Status, she demanded, catastrophic. Damage to 7 ships, the tactical officer panted. We cannot withstand another salvo. Verana felt the walls of her certainty cracking. She had come here believing in absolute Federation supremacy, convinced no remnant of old humanity could pose a threat. Yet in one moment, one calibrated demonstration, her entire doctrine had been obliterated. Still, the Federation's pride did not allow retreat. She forced herself upright. All remaining ships, prepare boarding pods. We take that ship or we die. Even as she spoke, another dreadnought's hull ruptured in the distance, shedding atmosphere in a long silent plume. Within the Ark, a Stellan squad finally reached a vast internal hangar, only to discover the ancient vehicles arrayed. Within had begun to power up. Colossal armored walkers, tall as a city block, stirred under the caress of awakening systems. One soldier dropped to his knees, his voice breaking. Gods help us, they never lost any of it. A Stellan's visor flickered with a priority override. A live feed from the flagship, showing their own armada in chaos. He watched in mute horror as human weapons they had no defense against bent reality itself. Above the hangar's threshold, new words formed in flowing script. This is the price of your arrogance. In that instant, as Federation warships burned and humans stepped back into legend, it was clear no strategy or doctrine could save them. The humans were awake, and they had never stopped preparing for this day. A Stellan stared up at the towering war machines rising from their cradles, ancient and unthinkably advanced. Their exhaustions shimmered with layered defense fields and etched warning glyphs glowing softly in the ambient light. One stepped forward with a seismic tremor, its steps perfectly balanced, not rusted by time but preserved in readiness. We're not fighting that, one soldier muttered. We're not fighting any of that. Inside his helmet, Astellan's training warred with a feeling he hadn't known since childhood, helpless awe. He could hear the others breathing rapidly, panicked. He understood now why the legends had always sounded like myths. Compared to this, everything in the Federation was toy work. Then the voice returned. You have forced this confrontation. And now you will witness the truth of what humanity became. Outside, the Federation fleet was unraveling. Desperation replaced doctrine. Ships spun erratically, propulsion systems overtaxed. The gravity wave had fried sensor arrays, forced captains to navigate manually, something few had ever trained for. Strategos Verana stood amidst the wreckage of her own assumptions, gripping the edge of her command table as updates poured in. 43% of fleet weapons offline. AI combat cores locked out. Long range comes, distorted by interference of unknown origin. But it was the final message from the science deck that broke her composure. The Ark's reactor is not fusion-based. It's something else, something post-physical. It shouldn't exist. Her hands trembled. For the first time in her career, she whispered not a command, but a question. What are they? In answer, the Ark spoke again, not to the fleet, but to every mind aboard. Directly, a shared vision erupted across all consciousness. A planetary surface scorched, desolate yet teeming with machines that rebuilt it in weeks. An asteroid belt where Terran colonists had tamed gravity, turning drifting rocks into mobile cities. An alien armada, 5 times the size of the current Federation, shattered in a single night by the Terran Ninth Fleet using weapons that bent. Causality. We did not seek conquest, the voice said. But you have mistaken our silence for defeat. In the Ark's strategic core, Roswin stood beside a high-humming console. Her adjutant Elian gestured at the incoming wave of boarding pods still streaking toward the hull like fireflies. They're still coming. Even after all this, Roswin didn't look up. Her hands danced over the command interface, activating the final layer of the Ark's defenses. They need one more lesson. At the moment the pods breached the surface, they were met not with counter-fire but silence. No auto turrets, no resistance. The Federation troops inside took it as a small victory. They should have known better. The moment they touched the interior decks, the Ark absorbed them, quite literally. Vast fields of neurometal shimmered into liquid, flowing over pods like mercury, locking them in stasis. Inside, the soldiers floated conscious but paralyzed, their minds interfacing with something far older, something curious, something evaluating. A Stellan, still deep within the hangar, received a priority alert from Fleet Command, then a second, and a third. One by one, he watched the boarding teams go dark, not dead, just gone. He didn't ask permission. Squad, we're moving, now. As they raced through the shifting corridors, something strange happened. The ship began opening the path for them. The walls slid aside, doors unlocked. Lights traced their path forward. Roswin had noticed the commander's restraint, his refusal to fire blindly, his efforts to preserve life. The Ark had noticed, at last. A Stellan and his battered squad emerged into a chamber unlike any other, a room of stars. Projected holograms of the galaxy surrounded them, real-time movements of fleets and systems tracked with pinpoint accuracy. But it wasn't the visuals that froze them in place. It was the presence in the center. She stood tall, armored in a style none of them could place, her eyes glowing with golden data streams. She looked human, entirely human, but carried herself like a myth reborn. "Are you the commander?" she asked, her voice gentle, clear. A Stellan nodded slowly. "Yes. I am Roswin, commander of the Ark Sovereign, steward of Earth's last will." She stepped forward. "You have shown hesitation where others did not. You may deliver a message to your strategos." He straightened. "What message?" Roswin turned slightly, gesturing to the full galactic map, where multiple Ark signals had just begun blinking across sectors the Federation considered uninhabited. "We are not alone. There are more of us. We have slept beneath your colonies, your research stations, your sacred worlds, watching, waiting. We were not just one Ark. We were the failsafe." Her expression hardened. "You invaded our tomb thinking it was a ruin. You mistook our silence for extinction. But we did not die. We endured." Outside, on the flagship, Mirana's sensors screamed as dozens of identical Ark signals ignited across deep space. Each one was marked by a single shared code, Terra Adernum. A Stellan's voice came through the comms, distant and steady. "Strategos. They are not reclaiming a ship. They are reclaiming the galaxy." Every screen flickered again. A final message, broadcast in all languages. "You woke us. Now we remember." And in that instant, even the proudest Federation captains knew. This was not a war they had started. It was a reckoning they had summoned, and it had only just begun above the shattered formation of Federation ships. The Ark's hull blossomed with new arrays, petal-like structures unfolding in perfect symmetry. The spectral glow from their lattice cores intensified until it painted the darkness in shimmering auroras. On the radiant ascendancy, Strategos Verana gripped the railing to keep her legs steady. The tactical overlays updated again, showing a grim new reality. more than a dozen ARC signatures emerging across the system perimeter, each accompanied by the same untranslatable data packets that had already paralyzed their eyes. Her comms officer turned with hollow eyes. Stratago's long-range comm relays are collapsing, every channel flooded with human code. We can't stop it. In that instant, she realized she was no longer the hunter. She was the prey. Recall every boarding pod, she ordered, and retreat immediately. But the order came too late. From the ARC's dorsal veins, lines of incandescence coalesced. The singularity projectors activated again, this time in a continuous cycle. Space folded, a shimmering curtain slicing between the dreadnoughts. One ship vanished in a compression implosion, so absolute it left only a silver afterimage. Another was hurled backward by a gravity shear, its ULL plates peeling away like leaves in a storm. Varana's flagship trembled under the backlash. A deep groan resonated through the decks. She looked up at the main screen, and there, superimposed over the carnage, was a final message from the ARC. You will remember who we were. Inside the ARC, Roswin stood at the heart of the command gallery. Her hands spread over the control lattice. The other ARCs were linking to her ship's systems, forming a tactical mesh older than any Federation doctrine. In her mind's eye, she could see it all. The arcs of fleeing dreadnoughts, the last boarding pods trying to break free, the ragged pockets of Federation defiance. They still think this is salvage, Alian murmured beside her. A resource to be claimed. Roswin's voice was soft as falling ash. Let them see the cost. At her gesture, the ARC's hangar bays released their oldest children. A Stellan, pinned with his squad near the projection chamber, felt the vibration first, a resonance so deep it seemed to vibrate the marrow in his bones. They turned as the floor at the chamber's far end split open, and rising from the pit came shapes no living Federation soldier had ever witnessed. Humanoid warforms plated in living alloy, each bearing the sigil of the Terran Dominion. Eyes blazed with glacial blue. In their hands were weapons whose contours defied the mind rifles whose barrels flowed like mercury, blades that hummed with silent menace. A Stellan couldn't look away. He knew, without being told, that these were the last line of defense. The Warden's Dahi raised his hands, palms open. We are withdrawing, he said clearly, not caring if his voice broke. We have heard your message. One of the wardens inclined its helm fractionally, acknowledging him. It made no move to strike. But further down the corridor, a second team of Federation Marines, less disciplined, fired a volley in blind panic. It was a mistake. In a blur of movement, the wardens descended on them. Blasts of coherent graviton energy pinned the soldiers. Mid-stride, their weapons buckled as molecular bonds fractured under invisible pressure. There were no screams, just silence as the Federation troops were laid flat in perfect rows, rendered unconscious but unharmed. Roswin watched it all on her tactical display. They were not monsters. They were not conquerors. But she would not allow humanity's last legacy to be reduced to a footnote. Outside, Varana stared as the other arcs closed their formation, each new hull bristling with weapons she could scarcely comprehend. The final dreadnoughts fired in desperation, but their beams dissolved in mid-flight. Caught in localized distortions. Her comms chief looked up, tears running freely. Strategos. We are outmatched. Varana swallowed. Even now, even as her ships died around her, pride fought with the truth in her chest. But when she spoke, her voice was ragged and human. Transmit full withdrawal, all forces, all sectors. As her battered fleet limped into retreat, the ARC formations did not pursue. They simply watched, implacable and patient. To the Federation, it would feel like mercy. To Roswin, it was a final warning. A Stellan and his squad emerged into the hangar, blinking as the evacuation beacon on their dropship finally pulsed green. In the distance, the wounded Federation flotilla staggered toward the jump corridor, trailed by plumes of gas and debris. He turned for one last look at the chamber behind him. The wardens stood in silent rows, their weapons lowered, not celebrating, not mocking, only waiting. At the heart of it all, Roswin's projection coalesced again, a golden silhouette in the air. Her eyes met Estellan's, and he understood what she was telling him, without words, without threat. This is what you woke. This is who you challenged. He bowed his head once, a gesture of respect he never could have imagined giving to a legend. The flagship, Verana, closed her eyes as the last jump signatures flared. And in the starless silence that followed, the Ark's voice spoke for the final time. We are humanity. And we are awake. Then the arrays folded away. The gravitic distortions subsided, and for the first time in a million years, the galaxy beheld the Terran dominion risen once more. The starfield was calm again. Debris drifted in gentle arcs where the Federation fleet had gathered only hours before. Glowing wreckage slowly cooled, and in the emptiness between the last jump echoes, a profound silence reigned. Inside the Radiant Ascendancy, Strategos Verana stood alone in the shattered command gallery. The overhead displays flickered with failing power. Reports scrolled across broken screens, lost tallies, casualty estimates, lists of ships confirmed destroyed or missing. She pressed her palm to the smooth glass of the main viewport. Far below, the enormous shape of the Ark lingered, dark and silent. It did not advance. It made no further threat. It simply was, a colossal statement that needed no embellishment. Around her, technicians and officers moved like ghosts. The proud Federation had never been humbled like this, not in recorded history. And still, no word came from the remaining fleets, only fragmented transmissions. Verana closed her eyes, feeling the weight of it in her chest. She thought of all the centuries the Federation had declared itself the inheritor of the stars. How they had written histories proclaiming humanity extinct, how they had built empires on the ruins of old Earth without ever wondering whether the silence meant something other than defeat. And in that reflection, she felt the first glimmer of something unfamiliar, humility. On the Ark itself, Roswin stood alone in the Chamber of Stars. All tactical overlays had faded. The warforms had returned to their deep vaults, sealed away until the next time they were needed. Alian approached carefully. "They're gone," he said. "Every last ship has left the system." Roswin nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on the projection of the galaxy. The Federation was only one power among many. Others would hear of what had happened here. Some would take it as a warning. Some would come to test them again. But now, humanity's story was no longer buried. Alian hesitated before speaking again. "Commander, was this necessary?" Her golden eyes flickered. It was inevitable. She turned, gesturing at the swirling map of stars. "They claimed to be custodians of civilization," she said quietly. "But they forgot that civilization has many roots, and the deepest among them belongs to us." In the hangar bay, Estellan and his squad trudged toward their battered dropship. They moved like men released from a long nightmare. Every footstep felt heavier than the last. Before boarding, Estellan paused and looked back once more. The Ark's hull gleamed in the starlight, scarred in places, but still whole. He thought about the stories he'd heard as a boy, of the last Earthlings, monsters that had fled into the dark with weapons that could burn worlds. But what he'd seen here was not monstrous. It was something simpler and far harder to accept. A civilization that refused to die. He lifted his hand in a small, uncertain salute. And though there was no reply, he felt somewhere in the marrow of his being that they were seen. Hours later, as Federation survivors limped through the jump corridors, messages began to ripple outward. To distant colonies, to rivals, to the hidden powers lurking at the edges of known space. The Terrans are awake. On dozens of worlds, administrators and strategists stared at their feeds, unable to reconcile the old legends with the tactical footage. Arcs rising from cryosleep. weapons older than their civilizations. Entire fleets laid low with effortless precision. Some saw opportunity, others saw terror. But none dared dismiss what had happened. On a dusty mining outpost orbiting a red dwarf, an old historian read the dispatch, then leaned back in his chair and laughed a sound of wonder, not fear. "I knew it," he whispered. "I always knew they weren't gone." And across the galaxy, stories began again. Stories of a species that refused extinction, that slept beneath the ashes and waited, that did not forgive, but did not forget. In the chamber of stars, Roswin extinguished the final projection and looked out the massive viewport at the scattered worlds glimmering like fireflies. "We are awake," she whispered. "And we will never be silenced again." Beside her, Elian simply nodded. He understood. They all did now. Far below, hidden beneath layers of alloy and memory, the deepest archives of Earth hummed to life. Languages no one had spoken in hundreds of thousands of years. Songs, philosophies, art, all waiting for the day humanity could reclaim more than just its defense, its legacy. On the radiant ascendancy, Verana composed her final report to the Federation High Council. Her hands trembled as she typed, "Recommend immediate cessation of hostilities. Request diplomatic envoys. We are not prepared for this conflict." She stopped, staring at the cursor. Then, with a heavy exhale, she added a final line. "They are not what we believed. They are more." Outside, in the quiet vacuum, the Ark's hull reflected the distant light of 1,000,000 stars. No threat signals, no weapons deployed. Just presence unchallenged, unbroken. And in that silence, the galaxy shifted. Humanity was legend again.